All the way back in the start of this series, it all had a point of origin. The progenitor thought that spawned this whole journey I threw myself onto. And with the 10-year anniversary of the game that started this whole mess hot on my heels, and at the time of recording this, well past, I can think of no better time to ask, does the introduction of Witcher 3 complete the contract, or does it die on the path? The Witcher, it's a strange series to talk about, all things considered, because there's a whole host of fan varieties you have to deal with. Here are the main four I've found. The first type, fans of the 2015 Game of the Year winning title Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. They've played the game, maybe they've gotten a little into the lore, but that's it. No real connection beyond the fact that Geralt is cool, and they might be looking forward to The Witcher 4. Variety number 2. Fans of the CD Projekt Red franchise known as The Witcher. Odds are, they're a little disappointed that a lot of the Roche and Irileth storyline was cut during development along with the Sintra Plague. Again, they have a bit of a deeper understanding of the lore than the first variety, purely out of exposure, due to interacting with it in the second game, and maybe the first. In my personal opinion, the story is well worth the bothersome mechanics, though definitely not for everyone, and they better have the trophy cards in the remake. And with this, they are more likely than not to be a Triss fan. That's just how it works, it seems. The third variety, fans of the Andrzej Sapkowski book series known as The Witcher. These are a little more rare to find and run into just, due to the fact that it's a book series. Not many people are going to immediately dive for that as they would a very well-known video game. And unsurprisingly, they are deep into the lore, and are more often than not well-versed in such things that cats are most likely post-conjunction creatures and are known to be one of two creatures to absorb magic, the other being dragons. And these people are going to be Yen fans, and they will happily tell you why Triss is not the right romance option. But they tend to stay in their own little corner of the internet and book clubs. And option number 4. This option does not exist. There is not, and will never be, a Witcher TV series produced by Netflix. But if it did happen to do so, the first season would be perfectly okay, and then fall off the cliff immediately. Also, the fan cast for Henry Cavill as Geralt would be a pretty cool thing if a series like that ever did happen. So having sorted you all into nice, neat little boxes, beyond basic explorations of mechanics and stuff of that nature for note-keeping, I'll be aiming towards the first 2 boxes, a general understanding of the world and light lore for the characters shown in the game is expected, at least in terms of how everyone's interacting. There won't be massive introductions for every single character we run into, might be a light blurb. And now, for addressing the Joseph Anderson-sized elephant in the room. I, same as the rest of you, have been eagerly waiting for his Witcher 3 review. And seems that we got a bit of an April Fool's joke. We got exactly the first part, which, unfortunately for me, ends right about where I am ending my video in the story. So, while you might not actively be comparing the videos, but do know that I will be. And admittedly, I was banking on that video not releasing for another few years. But here we are. So, having expressed my insecurities about that, given a general idea of the audience I will be catering to, and on top of that, giving a rough idea of what we're aiming for with this intro, mainly focusing on the 5 pillars that I have mentioned in past, good explanation for the controls, a nice atmosphere, a wonderful storyline that doesn't give too much away, little quirks that make this game stand out above any other in the genre, and a decent enough length that doesn't stretch on for too long. Going through all 5 of those pillars, let's get started in earnest. This is The Witcher 3, White Orchard, a decade later. Booting up the game, we get treated to one of the better introductions to the world's current standings, complete with you becoming aware of what biases the speaker has, that being those of a cult known as the Church of the Eternal Fire. Through this, we receive a quick crash course on the current events and items within the world that you need to be aware of, to have a base understanding of the world at large, should you, like many people, be coming fresh into the game and not knowing the first thing about it. We get invasion, witchers, monsters, conjunctions, sorceresses, magic, the works. And now, we have reached the point that has cast me into the video game essay phase of this channel. The selection of difficulty, and more importantly to me and the creation of this series, how you emulate your Witcher 2 game file. For my recommendations, I feel the best way to play the game is either on Blood and Broken Bones, or my personal favorite, Death March. The reasons for which I will later touch on, but I do firmly believe that this is the best way to play it, balancing difficulty and actually being forced to use your resources. And now, for the moment that cast 1,000 ships. The very moment that resulted in me sitting down and recording that Deadbolt video all the way at the beginning on January 1st of 2024. If you want to manually input your information for the Witcher 2 save data and not go through the whole process and consternation and repeated unending run-throughs of White Orchard, set Simulate Witcher 2 save data to on. Otherwise, you will have to redo the section again and again until you finally figure out how it works. Having made doubly sure that I made the right decision for the third time of recording this piece, we enter yet another wonderful pre-rendered cutscene showing a duo of witchers tracking their quarry, a raven-haired sorceress days after a major battle, flashing between the escape and the hunt, before we get another very impressive transition from the pre-rendered cutscene we were in as the raven-haired sorceress was running through, cutting down cavalry, generally being a bit of a nuisance to both sides. Don't walk in front of cavalry charges, kids. We get this transition from pre-rendered to live gameplay, with surprisingly little drop in quality between them as we enter the tutorial proper. Waking to one of the more iconic scenes in all of gaming, we have a bath in Kaer Morhen, the Witcher Keep way off in the Blue Mountains. Being one of the more iconic sites in gaming, having everything from a reference to the show that does not exist, to even a little statue that you can buy for maybe a little too much money. But from here, we are given a quick tutorial after being rather rudely awakened by Yennefer, a character who has a little more than a slight history involving Geralt. As is the norm of these variety of tutorials, we are being bombarded with pop-ups, having more or less the usual control scheme. The benefit of this is its relative ease of access for people, even if the controls outside of combat do feel a little more like you're shouting commands at someone across a football field and they're attempting to follow them. Though in combat, I have found they are very responsive and snappy to work with. Here, we get to use our Witcher sense, off-brand detective mode, call it what you will, with right mouse. We quickly find the key, getting ordered to return with more juice for Yennefer, as is the nature of the relationship between them, and head downstairs, but not before taking in, easily, one of the best parts of this game and its atmosphere. The drop-dead, gorgeous views that can be created, even without the wonderful addition of photo mode that was added in the most recent next-gen update. All that aside, we saunter downstairs to find Vesemir, fast asleep and baking in the sun. Rousing him quick-like, we get our first bit of dialogue. Making our choice on whether or not we want to fully punish, or more so agree, with Vesemir's opinions at the moment, we head downstairs and get ourselves acquainted with our young child of surprise and ward, Cirilla. Running the walls, here we get a very quick crash course on movement. And whether or not that comment of screaming across a football field comes into play for your opinion, it is a fairly standard set of movement. E to interact and climb up with things, space to vault over objects and jump. Fall damage is unreliable and dangerous at the best of times, more often than not just killing you outright for some of the most shortfalls that even I could probably survive. And, of course, space. You can jump over gaps and roll to absorb some of the fall damage. And, of course, the classic shift to sprint. For the entirety of the tutorial section, we are dealing with well-established characters with personalities that, in the lore, can be easy to fall back on at a quick glance. And from what I can remember, they all seem to be fairly in line with their literary counterparts. First off, we have Lambert, who, as stated in a wonderful little poem, is a prick. We have Eskel, a significantly more level-headed rock of the three Wolven brothers at Kaer Morhen. Vesemir, our kindly teacher and father figure, one of the oldest witchers around from what I seem to remember. And then we have Ciri. She has that fiery young blood that craves action, and is also a walking plot device given her rather unique lineage, and it will be interesting to see what CD Projekt Red does in The Witcher 4, given her storyline. But we will burn that bridge when we get to it in a few years. Though something I have found most people firmly agree with on The Witcher is the storytelling and characters is the strong suit of this series as a whole, even drawing people back to the somewhat janky and, for some, unplayable gameplay of the first game. Second one, far easier to touch on, though I do recommend playing through that on easy mode. And considering it manages to do all this, I think it does a very fine job. Something, however, that is a little more contentious is the movement and combat. In the first two games, the blame thrown at its feet is acceptable enough. However, in this game, I would say while the combat is not the best aspect, it is damn fine and flows together wonderfully with the series. Let's look into the combat now, shall we? Here, the combat turns into a dance of sorts. Our goal is to not get hit, for on Death March, even one hit from any enemy can spell your ruin. But worry not, for as a Witcher, we have tools to help combat this issue. First up, the twin swords of silver and steel, an addition to the lore that was made within the games, interestingly enough, largely due to probably trying to spice up the combat a little, making little choices like that. Silver is used on monsters, as shown, shockingly, by the silver health bar. While they can be killed with steel weapons, it is not advisable, as the damage will not be significant in any way, and it will chew through the durability of your weapons. Conversely, we have a steel sword, used on humans and non-humans, elves, dwarves, things of that nature. Generally, the way to think about it is if you went for a walk in the woods by a Ren Fair, and you find it often enough, odds are you will use a steel sword against it. For the actual controls, it is what you expect. Light and heavy attacks, parries and ripostes, avoids and full dodge rolls. The controls are acceptable for a game of this scope and size, but beyond that, it's nothing to write home about. They get the job done, and they look pretty good doing it. Now for what actually separates a Witcher from your generic thug with a decent sword arm. Bombs, signs, potions, and oils. This is what it sounds like. You throw them at your foes for a variety of effects, some having poison gas, others freeze things, and others just blow up in a more fragmentation style. Main use I get out of these normally is clearing monster dens while exploring, and all you need to do, light the end of the fuse with Igni, and Bob's your uncle. For signs, in Witcher lore, there are 45 signs, all drawing from the natural world around you, with varying effects, from protecting you from a single blast, heliotrope, to creating gouts of fire, Igni. Of these signs, we have access to 5 of them, all of them having their own place in the combat system. Ard. Kinetic blast that draws from the plane of air, pushes things away, off of cliffs, and destroys some barricades, extinguishing small fires, and more often than not, a utility above combat spell, though it can be effective at knocking down foes for an instant finish, particularly good against airborne targets. Igni. If Ard is used more for utility, Igni is mostly offensive, setting foes on fire, melting armor, being a flamethrower, stuff of that ilk. Though it can be used in more utilitarian ways, namely lighting campfires and bombs, to being one of the more efficient ways to gather honeycombs with minimal damage to yourself. This one, surprisingly enough, draws from the plane of fire. Yrden. This one forms a magical trap that slows and binds targets inside, a necessity when dealing with specters and other groups by tapping into the ethereal plane and controlling movement, or potentially dealing damage to those within its grasp. Very situational, but very useful in that aforementioned situation. Quen. Pulling from the plane of Earth, this one is simple in its job. It absorbs an attack or two fully before breaking, potentially reflecting damage onto the attacker, all while draining more stamina for some of the higher variants, though it can be very easy to over-rely on this in particularly troublesome fights. Axii. Drawing from the plane of water, this one is battlefield control, stunning or even turning foes to fight on your side along with you. The other major use case for this sign is in dialogue to try and muddle someone's mind into doing as you request, even if it's something they would be particularly resistant to, as seen later in White Orchard. Due to the Trial of the Grasses, Witchers receive a host of boons: immunity to disease, enhanced reflexes, and most importantly here, the ability to metabolize certain things far quicker than a normal human would. This enhanced metabolism allows for the ingestion of tinctures normally fatal to humans. These can be drunk for a variety of effects, ranging from increased healing to dealing more damage with some of the basic ones, to decoctions with even more situational effects, which are made from certain mutagens taken from monsters you've killed. The trade-off of these is, even with our increased resistance, they are incredibly toxic. We have to balance the certain amount of boons we can get while not drinking too much, otherwise we will die due to overdosing on the toxins within. Simple blade oils that will deal more damage to a specific variety of foe associated with. They have limited charges per use, so you'll have to keep reapplying them should the fight extend longer than 20 strikes for the basic variety. The previous two, being decoctions, oils, and potions, are created with plants and other items found in the wider world. More often than not, they will also be a major money sink for you in the early game while you're getting your baseline kit set up. Having dealt with the background of the combat system, we return to the courtyard to see Ciri slaughtering her foe, knocking its head clean across the battlement. And then, quickly enough, everyone seems to disappear as this pleasant enough dream turns into a nightmare, with the titular wild hunt descending down, coating the world in frost with the Narglfair, and storms rage on, threats, and a single blade strike, cutting the world to black. And here we have one of, I believe, 5 necessary loading screens that you will see in this game, with the whole world generally being one continuous area that you move through. No Bethesda-style loading screens here. Now, if I were staying true to the origins of this series, and only focusing on the true tutorial, this is where we would end. Just reaching the 5th page in a single-spaced script, 7 for my double-spaced, and a reasonable runtime hanging around a solid 3.5 out of 5. It does its job. All the information needed is given, roughly tossed at your feet, but you still have to put the puzzle pieces together and figure out leveling, the full effects of potions, oils, the bestiary, and general world interaction and vital systems that are needed to know for exploration. However, this is about the introductory sequence as a whole, which shall end as we enter Velen. And I have 6 hours of footage to use, so with all that stated, we wake from our nightmares to the path back in No Man's Land. Receiving our rundown, we have yet another chance to personalize our Geralt's interactions. Both of these responses seem likely enough to be given, depending on how open he is feeling with Vesemir at this moment. This discussion carries on to where she could be now, considering the current shakeup of the surrounding countryside, with the whole invading army going to and fro, with civilians and beasts caught in the middle, leaving naught but corpses and destruction in their wake. It's no surprise that we would have questions as to where she would end up, or even for her safety. Though that last one is a bit more questionable, especially considering her particular skills. Speaking of corpses, we get interrupted by yet another wonderful sunrise with a small pack of corpse eaters, ghouls. And here we see the combat fully in action. A dance begins, back and forth, spinning between foes, locking on with Z, occasionally unlocking and twirling away, all punctuated by a flash of sign and sanguine fountains, flashing a few more tutorial messages about health generation, and we're looting the corpse eaters for all they're worth, namely potion ingredients, as we head out, finding Yen's Raven Skull pendant on our way. At least we know we're on the right track here. Calling our ever-present companion of Roach, we get another experience of The Witcher's janky controls during non-combat moments. Continuing the analogy of the football field, imagine somebody just put earmuffs on our victim and is now telling them to run an obstacle course. You'll get a general idea of how it feels. A scream off in the distance interrupts our political debate as we ride to intercept the source of it, a griffin. The particular favorite mythical creature of Scotch, the friend who I've roped into reading these scripts, and the one who constantly throws off the times for the averages I create. Kicking the feathered tomcat-shaped can down the road, we do our best to save the poor merchant, gaining a slightly battered mentor in the process. Here, we can choose whether or not to extort the poor bastard. Choosing not to, we do take his cousin's hospitality as a reward, alongside some base information in our bestiary.
Aye, half eagle, half tomcat, just like on the Lord's Crest, except this one is carrying me dead cow instead of a scepter.
The bestiary is a mostly in-world notebook of all the nasties we can find out and about, with the best ways to face them in combat, and some witness testimony. Riding into town and entering the tavern, it is perfectly boring and almost peaceful. though a thick air of stress, despair, and anger hangs about. It is what you would expect, after all, considering an invading army has moved through. Debates over coat of arms, a few drinks being passed around, someone from the big city trying to teach some overly plastered locals how to play the best in-game time waster since Pazak. Gwent. Getting back to it, we do catch a bit of the local tension in the bar as it shows its tamarind colors. Fuck it, that's going in the script. Give me some clip art. Tamarian colors from what looks like some deserters that we can find the squabblings of in our exploration of the surrounding countryside, should we care to look at. Clearly, they're trying to keep their heads low as possible. And after all, with a place like this, it's not shocking that people want to keep their heads down for as long as possible. Getting our wounded mentor that nice chilled rye he asked for, we do a quick sweep of the patrons. So far, none have seen our fate-bound partner. That is, until we find a rather nondescript-looking man in the corner. A nice, cordial enough gentleman, going by the name Gaunter O'Dim. Turns out, even without muttering her name, he already knows of Yen. For Master Dandelion's ballads, of course, not that you would expect him to be omniscient. Maintaining our polite exchange, as it is true that we are after our fated love, turns out she is most likely working with the Black Ones in the old fort. So, saying goodbye to our new friend, we head forth, a threat lingering on his lips.
We men of the road must stick together. Perhaps one day I'll be in trouble and you'll be nearby to help.
After getting in touch with the local townsfolk, we make our way to the local job board. Overhearing some of the general talk about the town, most of all can be connected to a later side quest or Witcher contract. So, let's get into those, shall we? Down the road, there's a house that is burnt to the ground. All in all, a fairly simple job that puts our Witcher senses to the test. After meandering through the village and dealing with some drowners to get some potion ingredients, we have found the culprit. Some drunk idiot who didn't like the fact that the Dwarven Smith was working with the Nilfgaardian army. Partially against his own will, but working with them nonetheless. Also, according to the lad, him being a greedy dwarf doesn't help his opinion on the matter. Here, we can either be bribed a whole 20 gold, a fairly decent amount of money, all things considered, or turn him over to Willis the Smith, and as a result, he shall be hanged without trial per the martial law of the recently occupied Temerian countryside. Our reward here is the forge being opened up for us to use as an armorer and some coin. Here we have a wonderful little sneak peek at the general interspecies tensions found on the continent, which will eventually come back with a vengeance later down the line. Down the river shore from the house that was burned down, we find our next and most dangerous contract yet. A quest that everyone and their mother has made a video about here in White Orchard, the legendary hunt for the most ferocious of all foes, the frying pan. Here, the use of Ard, with a little help from the plane of air, we now can do a little breaking and entering at the behest of a poor woman who recently had her frying pan go missing in the night. Robbing the woman for everything she's worth, we find a corpse and a monocle, potentially belonging to a certain spy master who we know, or rather knew, if this is the case. Expertly executed via a small, thin wire, the soldier lies dead. Across from some partially burned notes of troop movements, and, of course, there's a bastard who's behind it all. Our quarry. the frying pan scrubbed so clean you can see your face in it. As it seems, he wanted it for the ink. Hence the list of items that the gentleman asked for in the night of the old woman. Birch bark, berries, coal, all useful enough for making a quick ink in a letter to discuss what needs to be done, alongside cussing out a fellow informant and spy. Reporting back, we get the most handsome reward one could ask for: baked apples. And, with a little insight of this, we can see that even the most non-interesting sounding quests in the game can hold much more water than they appear. Here, as we head out to leave, Roach does what she will normally do best: teleport into a very inconvenient place as we head down the river a little further. Overhearing these women discuss the state of the water source, we follow up on our contract of a man named Odalin. Turns out, water is very important, and one source is filled with floaters and other nastiness. The other, which is relatively clean, is currently haunted by a wraith of some sort. It's far easier to deal with a wraith of some variety than stop an entire war. Getting a description of this specter, the logical through line is that it's a wraith of some variety. Here, we can barter for a better price on the creature should we wish for a heavier coin purse than the dozen or so baked apples we got last time. Making our way to the south, we find the telltale signs of a noon wraith. Despite what is commonly thought, peasants do not interrupt their labors at midday to get out of the sun. They do so to avoid noon wraiths. After poking about and reading some old diaries, we find the source of this infestation: an old corpse hanging in the well. Pulling it up, we find the arm is missing. Diving back down to find it, and hopefully, what's ever binding the spirit here. Through a treasure chest and an arm, the item is quickly found: a finely crafted and flammable bracelet. Seems that whatever caused this to happen, the woman was hanged, and as such, dropped into the cavern. As time withered her bones away, the arm and bracelet, considering it is much more weighty than a normal set of bones, fell down below. And with that, we now have our way to finish the issue. Doing some quick preparations of oils and bombs, signs. Everything's all set. Preparations finished. We face the wraith and start our dance of death. Oils and signs are essential to even make a scratch on the specter, which eventually make the fight very manageable. Here, we get a true taste of what a monster hunt looks like for a witcher, gathering tales from the townsfolk, clues from the place we have to slay our quarry, identification, and the final preparation of brewing oils, potions, and bombs, before finally reading the information that's needed and taking on and felling the beast once for all. Taking our trophy as proof, we return to the contractor with the skull, and here we have another choice to make: take the coin or let him keep the dowry of his daughter. Either way, you do get paid via coin or by gem. Being informed that the child outside's father once had a sword or two, we now head outwards and onwards towards the old fort, seeing what information we can gather on Yen, and hopefully be reunited with our destined love. Past the fort held by the Nilfgaardian army, we can find a bowman begging for our aid. According to him, his cargo and cart got assaulted by some monsters, presumably drowners, maybe a hag, or a dryad of some variety, given the environment. Agreeing to help, we find the cart and its driver quick enough, though interestingly enough, they're riddled with arrows. Facing off with the drowners we expected to find, we managed to clear them out quickly enough, grabbing the box of our bowman and interrogating him later, It turns out that part of our wonderful skills held by the Witcher is hearing things very well. In this case, the man's heart beating out of his chest in fear and lies. The liar does his best to escape, and should he make it a bit further, will lead us to a camp of fellow deserters that we will have to slaughter, though in this case, we knock him out and off his horse with a quick stroke of our blade. Here, we get a quick moral and political choice. Do we aid the Northern Realms in resistance against the Nilfgaardian onslaught? Do you hand him over to the Black Ones? Or do we extort him for all he's worth and take the box for ourselves, being a right greedy bastard? It seems in this case, our victim's rousing patriotism clearly has some effect on us as we let him go to fight another day. Or, as Geralt says, shit himself in the bushes another day. Our coin purse is a little bit heavier, and once more, we have brought the Witcher's famous neutrality into question. He seems to be very good at doing exactly the opposite of what he says he would. Jumping ahead past our introduction with the captain in the fort, we find ourselves answering another contract in one of the abandoned towns to the east of the map. Seems that a gentleman's brother is, per the title, missing in action, and his hound need an escort to deal with the ghouls already infesting the battlefield. All in all, a fairly simple job. We ride out with him, clear the battlefield, looking through the gore and shields, searching for any sign of him alive or dead. Fortunately for us, the hound has caught a scent off the edge of the field, and into the woods a little, we find a small abandoned hut containing Bastian, the man's brother, and a Nilfgaardian soldier, who seemingly formed a bond after surviving the battle together. Both heavily injured and using each other for survival, we have another choice. We can help push a decision one way or another. Do we leave the Nilfgaardian to die on his own and leave no good deed unpunished? Or do we have the brothers help him at risk to themselves? Whichever way you choose, morality seems to be such a fickle thing in a world such as this. At the information of the commander, we find ourselves in the hut of a herbalist who is currently doing her best to aid a dying woman who was attacked by the griffin. Here we get the chance to take a chance that she will be saved by our foul concoction of Swallow that, should things go wrong, cause an even more painful death. Or do we let her die a slow, painless death, aided by the herbalist's brews? Having gathered all the items needed on our past journey, we decide to make the brew quick enough and give it to her, on the off chance that it will do something. Our reward here is a recipe for Spectre oil, which was used in the Wraith contract previously mentioned, along with some assorted herbs. Here, later on in the game, we find the first instance of our actions being affected, or rather, coming back to haunt us in a separate area of the map, with her lover, who she was going to meet out in the woods, confronting us on our actions, depending on whether or not we saved her. Another thing we learn here is that some quests do have time or event limits. This one being the death of the griffin at the end of the area's questline, which I have found in playthroughs causing some surprise for people, as that is generally against the norm from what I've seen. Having finished the side content with vocal lines and being bounced to all corners of the map, we have finally arrived at the old fort. We are eventually brought inside after a bit of forced introductions to meet with the commander, one Peter Sar Gwynleve. General opinion of us is fairly low, but tolerated, as the flying bastard has been harassing everyone, soldiers included. Interrupting the meeting with the alderman, we see him at least trying to be nice and accommodating to them, taking less grain than they offer, as he more than likely has been in their shoes before, at least in theory, offering them a hand, though whether or not it is to help them up or strike them, only time will tell on that front. Congratulating the captain on his perceptiveness, not mistaking us for a dwarf, we breeze past introductions and go about the task of finding Yen. As always, nothing in life comes for free, and our payment shall be the death of the griffin. Here, we have two things that need to be done. Firstly, we need to bait out the beast with something called buckthorn, a very pungent aquatic flora. And second, we need to figure out what general information there is about the creature, from witnesses, and we have one just across the way, a hunter known as Mislav. Having our two paths to follow, we can quickly go and talk to the herbalist about where to find the buckthorn in this region. And with this, we can finally give the swallow to the dying woman. Handing over the potion, we are promptly told where to find it, and a little exchange about order and where she's from later, we can head over, go for a dive, grabbing the buckthorn along with a note on a chest containing a fair amount of Temerian insignia and some orders, which were undoubtedly followed to the letter, and a quest for us to follow in a later section, along with one more piece of our flying puzzle sorted. Riding into the woods, we managed to find Mislav currently tracking some wild dogs. Helping him out, we cut them down and promptly insert our foot right into the Witcher's mouth about a comment of monsters. Quickly moving on to try and avoid the embarrassment we found ourselves in, we end up in what appears to be a prime drinking spot, ransacked by the beast with some tracks leading towards a ridgeline. An equally prime spot to go set a nest if you're a flying creature that enjoys stealing wildlife and people, and generally anything else that moves that's larger than a hare. Clambering up the rocks with Mislav going his own way, we find a small gathering of corpses and a nest with the griffin's mate killed in her sleep. Seems the current mate is now going on a grief-filled rampage, generally killing anything he can get his claws on. Grief does terrible things to people, after all. And having gathered all the information we can, we are now prompted to level up, choosing from a wide range of skills, with varieties such as food lasting far longer for healing purposes, a particular favorite of mine for Death March, as healing is limited, to melting someone's armor when you hit them with Igni. Combine this with mutagens for additional balances and bonuses within. The bonuses are normally percentage based, though the number can stack fairly high if you go about it the right way. But having all that covered, there's still some ground we need to cover before we are at a proper area to go defeat the griffin. So, gathering our strength for the coming fight, a monster like this will not be easy to fell. Let's go around and cover some of the additional things that we can do in this world to go even the playing field and level up. Just beyond the nest, we have a place of power. You can draw from the elemental planes to boost certain signs and gain an ability point to spend. There are a total of 6 of them in White Orchard for us to find, scattered across the map. Found out and around, there are nests containing monsters. The exact specifics of how they work is beyond me, though it does make me wonder if ghouls are subterranean creatures, and if drowners make lodges the same way beavers do. There are a great deal of monsters around them, which are quickly dealt with via a light slaughter and a piece of ordnance dropped into their hole. The reward is a decent amount of XP, and some runestones or glyphs for your armor, along with some themed items based on the type of nest it was. There are a total of 3 in the area normally near places of power or battlefields. Non-human beasties aren't the only monsters roving through the countryside. Another variety you might find is the bandit or deserter variety. Their camps, 6 of them in total, are unshockingly centered around the main roadways of population centers, which are ripe for the plunder. The overarching story for some of them is that they are deserters or soldiers still fighting a guerrilla war against the invading army, though most are just marauders trying to keep their coin purses full. Slaughter the bandits and the camp will be cleared. Just what it says on the tin. Overall, an uninteresting entry. Things collect treasure, treasure is valuable, thus we will fight them for it. If you care to look really hard through your VaatiVidya lens, found after all. The devil is in the details after all. 5 instances of this on the map for us to find. Grabbing all of them, they're generally guarded by a variety of enemies, from wolves, drowners, maybe a stray deserter or two. Second verse, same as the first. General goods being brought in and hidden to be picked up by a buyer. Normally one of my spots to grab the silver needed for the Viper sword, or just general goods to sell for some Gwent cards. The spoils are lesser known and generally not talked about in my experience, being found behind the fortress near some buckthorn, well under the water in a sunken ship. Protected by drowners, it's the crossbow's turn to quickly dispatch them, and we continue on without much effort on our little cleanup montage. There's one of each. See previous entry for Monster Nest. Quick clear out, cutscene later, the townsfolk return to the area, and more often than not, a merchant is with them. 2 instances on the map. Having cleared the more boring lists, we now have the hidden treasure and Witcher gear. These actually have a story attached to them, and even can be referenced by villagers in daily conversation. The Viper School is a very topical group to have as our first set of Witcher gear in the area. Originally being founded as a splinter group of the Bear School, their purpose was to fight against the Wild Hunt, as shown by the effectiveness in the task by Letho of Gullet, along with some other members we fight alongside during events prior to the first game. Here in White Orchard, we follow the story of one Colgrim, who is tasked with retrieving some lost diagrams of the blades they use. Stopping in White Orchard on his way back home, he got walloped by misfortune. The son of a local beekeeper went missing, and given the stereotype of witchers stealing children, which is only partially untrue, mind you, he is therefore arrested, the diagrams confiscated, one of which is found at the bandit camp to the east of the ransacked village, formerly an old fort for the local lord. Claiming his right to trial by ordeal, he was to clear out the old crypt of wraiths, haunting the place, though before he could fully test himself, a mob, led by the missing boy's father, attacked and killed him, dumping his body in the crypt along with the other diagram. It was later found the boy was stolen away and killed by drowners. The event has been covered up slightly ever since. This is what it says on the tin. There's gold in them there hills, just waiting to be stolen back. While we are getting the buckthorn all the way back on page 12, we picked up a note regarding the movements of some nobles being evacuated, presumably before or during the siege of Vizima. Unshockingly, some of the soldiers decided that they could take the riches for themselves, and as such, the nobles might not have reached their intended destination. Going forth to liberate the gold for our cause, we find a few more of CD Projekt's favorite mechanism of side story delivery: random pieces of paper scattered about. The 2 other places these are found is the hills to the north. Both camps are filled with deserters, which need to be dealt with before we can keep the gold for ourselves. Seems as the invasion raged on, discipline was in short supply, resulting in the current state we find these 2 camps in, and, later down the line, we can even see them being reoccupied by the Nilfgaardian soldiers after we return. And with that, we have covered all of the side content needed. With that, I think we can get back to the main story. Having sidetracked enough, and the view count dwindling away, we can now touch on the actual hunt. Returning to Vesemir, with our gear upgraded by the quartermaster and smith, we get everything squared away. After half a year on the path, we finally have a better chance of finding Yen than ever, and all that stands between us is one oversized coat of arms. Running through our plans of setting the buckthorn lure and then jumping it as soon as we get some more distance between us cut down, we engage on a bit of banter involving Geralt's particular thoughts on hygiene. Being forced to brew one final potion, we meet up with the old witcher, who has our bait set on a particularly unlucky lamb as the lure. Being tossed a crossbow for quick pot shots, and our entire combat kit is complete. Beastery, red, and blades sharp, glistening with oil, our little dance of death is about to begin. Having hollow bones to facilitate flying, Ard and grenades do a wonderful job of bringing it down to the ground and stunning it, giving us a bit more time to use flowing strikes rather than hit-and-run tactics. Working in tandem, the two witchers quickly start whittling away the beast before it takes flight, attempting to regain control before being brought low by a bolt from our new toy and fleeing towards the nearby windmill to make a last stand. Following along, it does not take much to slay the monster, as we soon collect a little bit of advice from our mentor and the trophy as our prize and proof of purchase. Trophies can be hung from Roach and give small boons, such as additional gold, more XP, or even just a better chance to dismember foes, and more often than not, are forgotten and just left to the side. Quite literally, in fact. Back at the old fort, we run into the alderman again, who's currently found himself in a slight pickle. Those 30 stacks of grain that were supposed to be delivered, rot has spread through them. Whether or not those grains were specifically chosen is unknown, but per Military Codex, Article 2, Section 3, his to be whipped with a knout as punishment. And here we have another dilemma tossed at our feet, with Geralt famously not choosing at all when it comes to such questionable choices about evil being lesser, middling, mild, greater. Do we take the gold which we were offered, as Book Geralt most certainly would have done in my opinion, or, out of more of a moralist stance, refuse to be paid for our work of killing the beast of White Orchard? Who's to say what is right on the matter, as given the captain's past work as a farmer, he no doubt easily can identify the rotten grain, and most likely the improper way of storing it that resulted in the current fiasco. Though, with all this, the intention behind his actions are largely unknown, so it quickly becomes a matter of deciding which person's side do we take on this matter. This decision has to be made swiftly, as time is ticking away. Something we'll be seeing a few more of out in the world, particularly with high-stress questions like this that really test your morals. Taking the coin and learning that Yen was in the former capital of the region, only a day or so ride from here, we head back to the inn to attempt to find our way to Vizima before Yen can do as she always does and disappear in a poof of lilac perfume and very fashionable black smoke. With the stress of the beast now gone, a different and even more dangerous tension has appeared to take its place. With the rule of the Golden Sun now completely uncontested by nature, tempers are boiling up and starting to flare. Noses are bloodied. Threats and rather rude words are exchanged, only to fall on deaf ears, and steel is loosed from its leather straps, thirsting for blood. Unshockingly, even with a numbers advantage, it doesn't take long for the witchers to slaughter the vagabonds. While it does seem the best way to kill a witcher is with a mob and some pitchforks, it seems that they're lacking those pitchforks. Much to the very understandable fear of everyone in the tavern, everyone starts backing away, screaming, retching, all in all, not having a great time. Wonder if that action will ever come back to haunt us.
Foreshadowing as a narrative device.
Even for all the good we witchers do, people still view them as non-human freaks. Mutants stolen away and turned into something inferior and disgusting. So while some witchers help out, in fact, the vast majority might, if we're going to stay on theme here, a few rotten bags of wheat will spoil the whole silo. Having the aftermath of this interact and take place, we decide to leave while we still can, though it seems some people have already caught up to us. Outside, there's a small contingent of Nilfgaardian riders waiting for us, and just beyond, we see something that makes Geralt's breath catch in his throat. Yennefer of Vengerberg, as raven-clad and dry-witted as always, but something is clearly troubling her, and what might have been a slow, rather steamy reunion is a rather quick one. Something isn't right. And clearly it's not just Geralt's excuse of the bout of amnesia we both suffered over the last 2 games, but rather something more. Ever the horny bastard, Geralt remains unchanged, with Yen flatly denying us before informing us of who our new contract giver is. A man who last we saw wanted us dead. But times change, and with them, situations and allies. One Emperor Emir von Everest, the white flame dancing upon the grave of his foes. Doing the wise thing, and quickly extricating himself from the situation, Vesemir slips into the background to go back to Kaer Morhen and prepare for the coming winter. Riding off with Yen, our little ride and pleasant discussion underneath the moonlight is quickly interrupted as the air turns thick with frost. The titular wild hunt hot on our trail. It seems the only thing that stops them is the brave and completely unwilling and voluntary sacrifice of the escort alongside the one weakness of any spectral rider. An average-sized bridge being blown up across a river. And with that, we arrive back at the former capital of Vizima, hopefully somewhere a bit safer than there might otherwise be from wild riders of far-off lands who patrol the night sky. Breezing past the audience, we are bathed, shaved, and made to obey. The major thing of note being our ability to choose some of the finer details of what we did in the past game, and most importantly, that we saved Letho. Going through the attempts of learning to bow, and potentially failing consistently, or maybe doing a bit better, we go to meet the White Flame. Not wanting to disappoint our new friend the Chamberlain, we do what Geralt has never done before, and attempt to bow before the Emperor. Here, our task is set before us. Ciri, as our dream foretold, has reappeared, and we are to find her and supposedly bring her back so she can assume the throne of Nilfgaard. Conferring with Yen and getting thrashed by one of the gentlemen in the courtyard in Gwent, we go forth to Velen to find our ward, wherever the story may take us. And here we come to the entire premise of the video. Is it a good introductory segment to the game? Let's look at the pillars and find out. These are explained well enough. Out of combat and on Roach, they can feel a little bit strange. Once more, I will bring forth the analogy of yelling at someone across a football stadium. But in combat, a whole different animal. It turns into a fluid dance that can be picked up fairly quickly. So, in my opinion, I shall give the point here. Here, something I haven't mentioned during the video before comes out in full force. The soundtrack is absolutely breathtaking and sets the tone that you will be working with extraordinarily well. Even if some of it does turn into Banana Tiger, it really does lend itself to the Eastern European folklore and mythology used. Each of the areas in the game also have their own distinct feel and sound to them. Partially done, I think, due to the color grading and saturation you can find in there. Skellige is cold and clean feeling, unadulterated by any filters beyond what you would normally find in a game with the fact that it is digital. Velen is dirty and carries a deep hopelessness to it. Novigrad is bustling and shadowed by the high walls and Tudor-style homes. Toussaint is bright, saturated, almost blindingly so, and almost plucked right from a fairy tale. And White Orchard, pure and relatively untamed, perfect for a new beginning. Everything swirls together. The clothing, the manner of speech being that definitely not English, British, Isles style accent that you find for any slightly generic fantasy world. Everything comes together perfectly in my mind to get a full point in this aspect. The intro is completely riddled with the start of the story to come. The meeting of Emhyr, the wild hunt running about, the monsters. It has it all. You get the little breadcrumbs to snack on as you go on, before getting the full pie when you enter Velen and Novigrad. All of the little pieces of the other stories, like that of Colgrim and the Viper School, the deserters, even that of what's going on in the little village you're at, people changing their names, not being allowed to sing the old songs they used to, shields being taken down. There's little stories everywhere in the game, and all you need to do is look. Full points. Given the rather uncommon system used for combat, I would say it is pretty quirky, with the addition of signs and potions being damn near mandatory on high levels if you want to make the combat function and not spend your time running into a brick wall. While shorter than the other sections of the pillars, this one speaks for itself, so giving it the full point on that front. Here we get to some actual math for how long it takes to go through. For my casual run of trying to get the footage and B-roll, it took a grand total of 3 hours and 20 minutes. So it takes a good amount of time if you're exploring, looking around all the nooks and crannies, and really smelling the roses along the way. And as it goes, it's a perfectly acceptable way to get back into the flow of the combat and setting if you've put the game down for a few years. As for what I normally do, which is as much as you can to get back into the main story proper and just speed run through, it took me about 2 hours and 12 minutes. So not all that long, everything considered, compared to the original time frame, but it is a good bit quicker. So it should, in theory, take about 1 afternoon or 2 or so full sessions that, in my opinion, will fly by, as there really isn't anything that needs to be done that wastes your time. And if you know where everything is and how to get to it right off the bat, namely the Buckthorn, you're able to go through quick as a whistle. But given the fact that it does take a decent amount of time, I can't in good faith give it a full point here, as the main fault as to why I don't replay games like this or Red Dead Redemption 2 as often as I would like is the fact that it takes so long, and with this, I am still slightly questioning my decision to make a video on Coulter and the Red Dead 2 introduction. So wrapping up, I would say that White Orchard, while not the best tutorial, is an absolutely perfect recreation of the world at large, even down to the slightly specialized use case loot runs in the bandit camps and smugglers' dens, like that which pollutes Skellige to an insane degree. All in all, I would say that it doesn't succeed in the wide-reaching tutorial that other games might have, but when a game is fully reaching for a niche and staying in its little corner, and it sticks to creating a full microcosm of the world at large, I would say that it does so with flying colors. And even with its length, it makes me go back and dive into The Witcher at least a few times every year. So when you get down to it, it does unfortunately come largely down to what you want in a game. you want it to be largely successful at the price of forsaking what makes it unique, or to largely excel at what you want it to do, but at the cost of a wider audience? So while I would say this game gets a solid 4.5 out of 5, it does a damn good job of what it sets out to do, but not quite enough to overcome the flaws it brings upon itself. So, having wrapped all of this up, what are your thoughts? Does it do a good enough job, or is it too long? Does it make its way down the path and survive, or does it get cut down by the drowners infesting the waters? Do let me know down below your thoughts, and as always, what game would you like me to cover next? In the coming month of June and July, I might be trying something a bit different with my video, but, well, let's burn that bridge when we get there. But, as always, I'm Sven, and this is Elven Prince, signing out.